everyone. Thank you for coming. It's great to see you out here. I'm Jennifer Jenkins. I'm the director of the Southwest Center at the University of Arizona, which is the proud institutional home to In the Americas. And I have an office right next to David, so I feel like I've really made it. I don't have a lot to say. I just want to thank our donors and the Loft for helping us with this wonderful event. And I'm going to hand this over to David so you can see what you came here for. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jennifer. Imagine I have to work with people like that. I want to introduce some people who have made In the Americas possible. And I will ask them just to raise their hands. But my dear longtime friends, Bob and Carol Dorsey, would you raise your hands, Bob and Carol? Laura and Arch Brown. Come on, hands up. They are endowers of In the Americas who have made it possible. I also want to recognize Carlos Quintero, who has put this all together. Carlos is up here. And without him, everything falls apart. Now, so there are some other very important people here. First of all, Dan Duncan. He and I have been working together for 33 years.
Wow.
And he gets better all the time, and I don't know how, because he has this magical eye. But Dan, I can't tell you how you have changed my life. And here he is over there. Other people who have worked or are working with us, one very important individual is sitting sort of toward the back. His name is Copal Ramirez. You have heard his voice as the introduction to The Desert Speaks, and you will hear it pretty soon. You have to stand up so everybody can see that. Jacobo is also one of Tucson's institutional musicians who plays the guitar and has a voice that will put you into a different realm, a good realm, not a bad realm. Another person who is working with us here is a relatively new participant in our program. I don't know where she is, I know she's here, but Julia Franco, who is fresh to Tucson from Belo Horizonte in Brazil, and is now a prominent Tucsonan and is doing some very important technical work with us on In the Americas. My very dear friend, Alberto Borges, who you have seen, he's that handsome guy you see in the Americas. And people always say, they say, who's that handsome guy with you? I say, well, my chopped liver, you know? and so here he is. Go. Yetman.
Ben Weaver, but he's
No, we have one person, Ben Weaver, but he can't make it. He works in Idaho. That's a problem. I want to just give you a few words about our first program. It's on the African culture of the city of Salvador in Brazil. Salvador is a very special place because it has the most potent cultural atmosphere of African Brazilian, or perhaps African influence in the Americas. Brazil is certainly not quite, perhaps almost as racist as the United States. But Black culture has been so important in the formation of that country that it is much more prominent than anything we have in the United States. It's a heritage of slavery. There were 5 million Africans exported to Brazil, most of them to work in the sugarcane industry. Europe developed a taste for sugar, which was explosively expanding for over 100 years. And Brazil was the primary producer of that sugar, and it takes huge amounts of slave labor to produce it. But also there was gold found in central Brazil in the state of Minas Gerais, which is where Julia Franco is from, and that required enormous amounts of slave labor. Don't let anybody tell you that things like Elon Musk says, no, it's not important economically. Without slavery, European countries could never have become as wealthy as they did. And especially Brazil figured into that. The people of Salvador are very aware of that, and they are bringing back the importance of the African element, and that's what this program is about.
Funding for Indie Americans with David Yetman was provided by Robert and Carol Dorsey, the Guilford Fund, Art and Laura Brown, and Hugh and Joyce Bell.
I guess, let's see, are we ready for Q&A? Yeah? Yeah? You have the answers. So you two, if you'll take seats here, and I'll just run the mic around for people who have questions. Who has questions? Kidding.
A stunned audience.
Hi, I'm Debbie Curley. I work at U of A, and I'm so glad you're on faculty here. You're quite a treasure. And I'm curious if you could just share with us like your process for how you create an episode or a season, like what inspires you to get started, and how do you come up with your topics and your questions and
Much of our creative material originates at Bob Docs. It's important to know that all of the material originates at the Southwest Center. Dan does 97% of the work. I do 3%, at least 2.5%, and then try to farm the rest off. Then there's somebody else who will do it. But we talk about things. We talk, where would we like to go next? We have the luxury, particularly with the most generous underwriters that we have tonight, Bob and Carol and Art and Laura, that we can say, where would we like to go and make it a reality? But we have different tasks. I mean, Dan, in addition to being the videographer who makes everything possible, Dan knows Brazil and has contacts in Brazil that continue to astound me. And if you think there's a preponderance of Brazilian programs, you're right. You have to keep in mind that Brazil occupies half of South America and more than half of its population. So it's disproportionately represented, often because Dan brings that Brazilian aspect to it. And I am a bystander in a lot of this because of Dan's ancient, well, I shouldn't say ancient, not that old, but Dan's long-term relationship with that country. Dan, talk about that.
I certainly have a bias towards Brazil since I grew up there as a kid. And actually, there's at least 4 Brazilians in the audience right now. Julia, who've known, and Kainá, which is right there. We've done a program with her dad in the Amazon region. Kainá to shake your hand. And then Alzira right next door. And then Nelza right there. I'm sure are there any other Brazilians in the audience? So there's the 4 that I know of. Interesting story, in 1983, I went to Bahia with Alzira, and we did a film called Afro-Brazilian Legacy. And some of the footage that you saw in the first episode was incorporated within the piece that you just saw. So we have some strong connections with that area of the country, and it's a subject I think is very worth exploring even deeper. It's so rich, and deserves to be documented and create a legacy for it for the future. We do have a long list, a medium list, and a short list when we pick out programs. And we go to Bob Dobbs and we say, all right, what's a low-hanging fruit? What can we do very quickly? Like one of the programs we did for the same season was a road trip from Oregon to Tucson. And we just did that a couple months ago. And that was Dave's idea to do a geology program on that road trip.
Most of you, I'm sure, have driven up to the top of Steens Mountain in Oregon, right? Well, it's a hidden treasure, believe me. Steens Mountain is a black faulted mountain in southeastern Oregon that has a very distinct character to it. It's a volcano, huge volcano with a drop off to the east of several thousand feet. And very few people actually go there. Southeastern Oregon is very minimally populated. But I found out because Dan and I were talking about a place, and how about Steens Mountain? And I talked to a friend of mine who is a geologist. You went to Steens Mountain? Well, that's the kind of thing that happens. We hear about it and say, well, let's go. And we often do. Something we hear about, let's go find out about it. Sometimes it takes more than 10 minutes to pack. We're off to Panama tomorrow to an area that's very tropical and very has an abundance, a superabundance of mosquitoes, but also indigenous people, tropical rainforest, marine life. And how did that come about? I said, Dan, let's go to Panama. And that's the history of it. But we also are open particularly to two different things. Any suggestions that people have, we like to listen to them and say, oh, it's a very good idea. And many of our programs originate from people suggesting places. The other thing that we have tried to do, not as successfully as I would like, is to incorporate projects from the University of Arizona faculty. The program we just saw in Chiapas was recommended to us by Daniela Tridan and Takeshi Inamota, both archaeologists at the U of A Department of Anthropology. And Joe Palta is an archaeologist from ASU. And terrific, as you saw, I mean, really knowledgeable. We like to mine information that's available. We have been very lucky to have an extraordinary repository of knowledge from Mexico, and my friend Alberto Borges, who has been in numerous programs with us and will be joining us tomorrow in Panama. We use him as a shield in Panama. We say, oh, we're not from the United States trying to get the Panama Canal back. We come with Dr. Borges to do his projects down there. But it's a story. That's how we do things.
Other questions? Anyone? Yes, please.
Any countries in the Americas that you haven't been to yet and you plan to?
Yeah, there are. We have not been to Paraguay. We haven't been able to find the appropriate connection there to do the program we would like to do. There is a history of Jesuit missions in Paraguay that we would like to, but it's very difficult to get that one done. We have not been to Venezuela for social reasons, because politically and strategically the country has been difficult to travel to. We had a program scheduled. We were working on a program in Suriname, but the airline that goes there was closed down by the government because of popular unrest in the country. So we decided it would be better to go to Bob Dobbs and plan rather than go to Suriname. We would love to go to Guyana, but it's extremely difficult to get permission to film there. We are interested in going to French Guiana, or Cayenne, which is the capital city. Our French is very limited, and it's also difficult for us to get permits to film there. Other than that, we have been to every South American country and every Central American country.
Except for El Salvador.
Oh, except for El Salvador. El Salvador could happen, but it's there are difficulties there. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes. Julia.
Sorry, can you speak really loudly?
We know that Julia has a strong voice.
So you've been doing this for a long time. What has changed from season 1 to season 12?
I want to turn that over to Dan.
Wow. So filmmaking is telling stories and using what tools you have to do such a thing. And that has changed. Oh, it's just night and day difference. The first season, we were lugging around a 60-pound camera, battery pack alone with about 15, 20 pounds. There was no steady cam involved. We were shooting the first years of HD at that time. The editing systems were super expensive. You know, we were paying, well, maybe $200-300 an hour to go edit this HD footage, which was sort of like on the cusp of technology at the time. Jump to today, and we're shooting with GoPro cameras and drones, and flying under the radar as much as we can to get to places that you can go with the big technology. Image quality, far superior to what it was way back when. We did a couple Grand Canyon programs with big HD camera, 12 years or so ago. And to get underwater shots, we actually rafted in a fish tank and put the big, it's a $100,000 camera inside a fish tank and submerged it to get underwater shots. Now with the $400, $500 GoPro, it images far superior to what we did back then. But that was crazy. I mean, who would put a piece of glass on top of a raft and float it down the Grand Canyon in Class 5 rapids? I mean, that was just nuts. When we did programs in the Pinacates, we rented helicopters to give us the aerial footage. Now we have drones. And we used to, pay $750 an hour to fly Jet Rangers around the Pinacates. And now with, a $2,000 drone, the images are just phenomenal. So technology-wise, it's changed considerably what we can do. But the basic element is the storytelling. So that has not changed. But it's the tools in which you tell the stories that have changed tremendously. It's so empowering for people today that they don't need that huge capital investment to tell a broadcast quality story. You don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of video equipment. You can do so with some creativity and modest resources at hand. So that's changed quite a bit. And people now are making feature films with their iPhones. So that's quite empowering. That's been the main basis for us. That's for the actual acquisition stage. For the editing stage, it's all done on laptops. And memory has become so much less expensive. A little memory card for, a terabyte, less than $100. So it's the game, technology has made it a game changer as far as making tools accessible and the process accessible to people who didn't have the means earlier. That answer? Yeah. That's from a production standpoint.
There was a scene that comes back to my mind, which is actually with The Desert Speaks back in 2003. And we were filming at a place called Laguna Colorada in the Lipes range in southwestern Bolivia at 14,200 feet, filming flamingos. There were 3 different species of flamingos living in that very high altitude basin lake. Dan was going in this very heavy camera, and Jacobo was holding the microphone. And that was the most miserable time, I think, in Jacobo's entire life. It was brutally cold. Matter of fact, it was below 0 that night. And the look on his face, and I have the photograph, and I had not had the guts to show it to him. It was a very miserable time, but that was a huge camera. We had to lug that thing everywhere. I didn't have to. I've always been, I'm so old and I can't carry that sort of stuff. But somebody had to carry the big heavy tripod, the very heavy camera. And hold the microphone at a distance because the equipment we have now. I don't want to tell you that we do guerrilla filming. Filming in places where we're not supposed to be filming, and we have to hide the microphone under my collar. We have very sophisticated microphones and boxes that will pick up the sound. And Dan pretends that he's not doing anything when he's not. We don't do that very much. But that's the technology which allows surreptitious activity to take place. We don't indulge in that very much.
Yeah.
I have a question about, are there any documentarians or filmmakers or journalists from whom you derive inspiration, either for storytelling or composition or the questions you ask when you're creating your episodes?
Well, who do I aspire to emulate? Well, I can't even try David Attenborough. I try to figure out how he does it. He's 112 years old, and he's as articulate as he ever was. That authoritative voice with which he speaks is like none other. And I look and say, "Gosh, I wish I could do that." But he is the epitome of the really finest, and you can't do any better than he is. So he is my idol in terms of documentary making. I can't, Dan, why don't you? I must say that when we had before I was host of the Desert Speaks, we had Don Collier, who was the voice. And his voice, that gravelly, authoritative voice that he had. He had no idea where we were. But he could memorize a script in 30 seconds, and he had that ability without knowing where he was and what he was talking about to convince you that this was the most important thing in the world. Dan and Don were really good friends. He's no longer with us. No, Dan was, but not Don. But he was truly a voice to be listened to.
Interesting story about Don and Dave. Don was the host for Desert Speaks, as many of you probably know, for 10 years. And then about that time, PBS came to us and said, hey, we're looking for more of an interactive host, someone who's not just the bookend host who does a stand-up at the beginning of the program, at the end, and some voiceovers in between. And we got together as a committee and we said, we need somebody like David Yetman, who had been on a few of the programs in the past. We had done a program with the Mayo Indians in Sonora. And we interviewed a couple people, and we came back, we need somebody more like Dave. No one's really fitting the bill. Interviewed a couple more people, did some on-screen, tryouts. And we're like, no, we need somebody like Dave. And somebody said, why don't we just ask Dave to be the host of the program? It's a true story. And so absolutely, I think he was hesitant at first after he consulted with Lynn, as far as not being maybe considered a generalist. Is that true or not? Or
Beats me.
But he did, consent, and that was the beginning of Dave's. Well, he'd been on camera many times before when he was a county supervisor, and a guest host many times before. But as far as a full-time host, presenter for PBS series, I think that was the beginning of his career.
And it was the beginning of a time when I got to work with Dan. Just you all don't know how great it is. I'll tell you, going to Brazil with Dan is always the University of Arizona likes to use the word transformative, which is a buzzword, but it's transformative to see how he fits in, how people trust him, how they listen to him, and how he can go up to somebody looking hostile and they're friends within a few seconds. And that's one of the great experiences I have. His Spanish is also very good. He's kind of a Portuñol, but his Portuñol is infinitely better than my Spanish. So I'm lucky, I am very lucky to have this guy to work with.
One of the programs we're doing for season 13 is we're planning to go to the islands of Fernando de Noronha, which are the Brazilian Galapagos. And so we're kind of looking forward to that. We're in the planning stages right now for that.
we'll talk about planting stages. I'll make it as brief as I can. We had a long conversation yesterday with the director of the head of the Department of Astronomy and Stewart Observatory, and we hope in April, be filming telescopes in Chile, and involving the University of Arizona with the new Magellan 25-meter wide mirror. Imagine that, 25-meter mirror, which is in the process of construction. But anyway, we will go to 4 of the 6 different telescopic sites in Chile. We have a tough life.
Yeah. More questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
You were speaking earlier about the way you had to lug heavy equipment around. You were speaking a little earlier about the lugging of heavy equipment around, and things have changed in that respect. So has that also been reflected in the lessening of personnel involved when you make these safaris? Like in the olden days, did it take 50 people to make this happen, and now it doesn't, and there's an economy that's come out of that? Or how does all that work?
Oh yeah, it's tremendously different. Dan and I are the crew, and very often Jacobo goes with us. Alberto goes with us from time to time. But when I was first host, there were always 5 or 6 people going along. One of them had no business being there, did nothing. Went along for the ride because he could. But yeah, there were always many more people involved in the production than just the 2 of us. Actually, we do have a videographer in Idaho who does a lot of the fine tuning. We have Julia helping us with it. So we do have other people working, but they don't go on. Generally, there are 3 of us go on trips, as opposed to 5 or 6 with the Desert Speaks, and before that, even more. But yeah, very good question.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When we were doing the Desert Speaks with Don Collier, I can remember times when there was probably 10 people on the field doing stand-ups. If we had a teleprompter in the field, you had to have to have a teleprompter operator or someone who holding cue cards behind the camera. You had a focus puller. You had multiple assistants. Contrast was not the friend of filmmakers back in the day, so you had to even it out. So we had big reflector boards. So we had people holding reflector boards, bouncing that light in. Right now, you can get away with just natural light and fix it in post, so to speak. If you shoot in a different format like RAW, you can do all kinds of color correcting in post-production. So yeah, with a very scaled down crew, you can accomplish so much more now, in addition to the technology facility.
Who else? Well, will you tell about what you're going to do in Panama? Or is it a secret?
Well, we don't talk about that sort of thing. We're going to northwest of Panama, an area called the Bocas del Toro archipelago. It is an area of much relatively intact forest, some spectacular marine life. It's an archipelago of many islands as well as an extensive coastline and indigenous people. We will be visiting the Nassau people who still have a king, a monarch, the only indigenous people in the Americas who still have a monarch. Anyway, it's a very rich area to go. And it was time we went. And I said to Dan, how about Bocas del Toro? And he said, oh, yes, Bocas del Toro, let's go. That's our consideration. That's how we figure things out.
Any last questions?
Yes.
Have you ever been worried for your well-being while you were filming?
Sure.
Have you ever been worried for your health and safety?
With the Desert Speaks once, we went up into the Sierra Madre in southern Sonora, and we did take an armed guard along. We have not done that. Also, Dan was attacked while he was filming at the Fiesta of San Francisco in Magdalena. was when he had the big camera, he really could not see peripherally what was going on. He had that happen. But since in the Americas, when Alberto Borges goes with us, he's such a strong bodyguard, strong presence that we don't worry about that sort of thing. You ever been worried?
I don't think so. And people ask me all the time, you know, you're worried about traveling in Mexico or wherever we go. I really don't stress about it very much. It's probably a good attitude to take. I mean, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But never really felt threatened or in danger, other than the time in Magdalena. And actually, the person who saved me from that was Dave. He stepped in between. We were shooting the pilgrimage festivals in Magdalena, in the plaza, and there was a big banda playing, and I was shooting the banda, and the banda was hired by a bunch of narcos, and they weren't too, pleased to know that I was shooting all these guys in a video kind of way, shooting, And so they came after me, and my hero here, Dave, stepped in between, and they were like huge, and he wasn't going to let them push me around.
They had to call ambulances to take care of the guys that I knocked over.
We were with Jesus Garcia. Some of you guys might know him from the Desert Museum, and he's from Magdalena, so he was able to smooth things out. But other than that, I really haven't felt. Oh, there was a time in Brazil, in Olinda. We were in the middle of a carnival celebration, and Dave was being targeted by some pickpockets. And the guy that we were with kind of noticed what was going on. And we were in a huge crowd. And if you've ever been in Brazil during Carnival, you get in these throngs that you can't even move your body. I mean, you're just trying to move with the movement of a million people, before and after and all around you. And Dave felt a hand grab the back of his collar and lift him up over the crowd and deposit him into a safe spot. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he was actually our driver. He kept an eye on me. I thought this innocent American needs an eye. Well, he was good. He'd been the best driver I've ever seen in my life. He was lent to us by the governor's office in the state of Pernambuco. Sometimes with Dan's talents, we get extra assistance from local people and local governments.
Yeah, that's from people. Elephant seals attacked us once when we were swimming with them in Baja.
Yeah, that was you. I wasn't. That was on me.
Yeah. Other than that, no. I mean, so we'll be out in the field, and there'll be a rattlesnake come along, and Dave will just squat and let the rattlesnake sit right underneath him in the shade. He thinks nothing of that.
Live and let live. That's my motto. Well, thank you all for coming. Really, you're a great audience.